Don't be afraid to break a cycle. Don't be afraid to break a pattern. Don't be afraid to change your habit. Don't be afraid to step into your truth and your purpose, because the world needs us and the world needs people like you to be able to make a change. And if you can do that, that will ripple on to many people around you.
Hey, Guy here, and it is cold, as you can tell. Welcome to my podcast, by the way. And I'm actually in the beautiful Abbotsford Convent in Melbourne. We're about to run our full one-day workshop, an advanced workshop. We're going to be getting into some advanced energy healing techniques. We're going to be clearing chakras. We're going to be doing sound journey. I've caught Matt working in the background today. He's setting up his sound gear now. We've got over 100 people coming. It's going to be a phenomenal day. Anyway, I just remember to record the intro. My beautiful guest is Schultz this week, who's a legend, and we get into his own awakening journey, but not only the work he's actually doing here in Australia is extremely important, and he's actually supporting mental health for men. Even though this podcast, whether you're male or female, is very relevant. And the one thing I want to reiterate as well is that this work and these conversations are not only helping people's lives, but they can be saving people's lives as well. So if these conversations resonate, please be sure to share it around and make sure you go and check out Aaron's work as well, because he's a legend and what he's doing here in Australia is fantastic. And I wanted to bring as many eyeballs to his work and awareness as possible. So please be sure, if you're watching this on YouTube, let me know where you are in the world and what you got out of this podcast as well. And if you know people struggling, please be sure to tag it or share it with a loved one or friend as well. We're going to be in New Zealand. We're going to be, where else are we going to be, Matt? Hobart. We're coming to Tasmania. We're coming to Perth, Croatia. We're out there. We're getting out there. So come and join us. Links are below. There's lots of stuff there below to help support you on your own journey. But most importantly, take action. Get amongst it. Sitting on the sidelines doesn't change anything. Much love from me. Enjoy this podcast with Aaron. And here's to an epic day in Melbourne, Abbotsford Convent. Aaron, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Guy. Really grateful to be here with you. I've been loving your work for quite a while, and I feel really honoured to be part of it.
I appreciate it, mate. It's nice to have the roles reversed, because I was on your podcast when we first connected. God, it must have been almost 2 years ago now, I would have reckoned, something like that.
I think so, yeah. A wonderful podcast too. A lot of people listened to that and got some wonderful feedback.
Yeah, and we'll mention it now because we always mention it at the end, but just the Outback Mind, right? Check it out. Get amongst it. Yeah,
Outback Mind Foundation is a charity I started a few years back to try and help elevate men's consciousness. Which is a challenge and a journey, as you know. But as we know, we've got so much potential as humans and as men. But we start to open that up and make that normal, then hopefully more people will gravitate towards being their best self.
When you are at an intimate dinner party then, and when people ask you do for a living, and you respond with that, because you almost answered it for me, which is great. How do people generally react?
Yeah, so pretty much the answer to that is I'm really a healer. That's my role in this lifetime. But my primary focus is to try and help men heal, to give them the education and the tools to be able to start to be curious and question and start to open themselves up to what's possible, rather than just being the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, all the stuff we're meant to be. It's actually opening ourselves up to what's possible for us as humans at the end of the day. And I've seen some wonderful transformations with people over the journey, men in prisons, men, that are performing at a high level athletically, from just the average man on the street, to give them the tools to start to, practice, self-connection and self-awareness again. And that's been a real joy, but we've still got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And I know, like, from speaking off air, you've been on one hell of a journey. You've grew up with your own traumas, your own spiritual experiences, and then you kind of was in the system for a while, as I think you framed it at one point. Then you woke up and then had a Kundalini awakening and all these different. So there's a lot there, right? And that's brought you to what you're doing today. And I'm really keen to dive into that. And I'm curious, like, why men? Like, I feel like I'm heart-centered like you, and I'm running retreats, and I just want to get the work out there to help people that are ready to step into it, because we both know how life-changing it is, right? And I just open it up, and so we have men and women, but funnily enough, 70% generally that come are women, and 30% of the men that are courageous enough to be in the group come and have a phenomenal response generally.
Experience.
You know, but
Yeah.
so I'm curious from your own journey, like, is it from what your childhood experiences? What's led you to wanting to work with men, and why you're getting out there?
Yeah, appreciate that. Good question. I guess when I was a young boy, I had some pretty positive male role models. So, you and I have talked about my dad, and I believe my dad was what we call a Blu-ray starseed. Just a beautiful soul that was really conscious and connected and kind and compassionate and lived life from that high vibration. He got sort of stuck and sucked into the third dimensional world. And my grandfather on my mother's side was very similar, just a beautiful, kind, compassionate man. So that was my observation of what a man's meant to be like as a young boy. I had some traumas as a young fella. You know, you might call them scaras, where I had a brain tumor removed. I was in hospital for a long time as a young boy, and I believe my mum had postnatal depression, which we'll probably talk about later. But I saw that, as being really the way we're meant to be as humans, like really, centered, grounded, compassionate, kind. That's really the essence of life, I believe. And when I was 14, I basically observed, male masculinity as being around the footy club and the cricket club, drinking and that type of thing. And I sort of had the awareness that I didn't want to behave like that early, but I got pulled into it. And I remember being at the local cricket club one night, and one of my dad's best friends abused me. And that really hit my heart.
When you say abuse, like verbal abuse, violent abuse, like what was
It was verbal abuse, to say that you're going to grow up to be a dickhead like your old man, in Australian language. And, just out of the blue, he was, probably intoxicated. So I went home and talked to my parents about that, and they sort of dismissed it. And the next day, he's around at my place drinking beer with my dad. So I was really hoping my dad would step up and stand up for me then and there. But being the individual that he was, he probably didn't feel like he wanted to cause conflict. But as I mentioned, underneath, his persona was a beautiful, kind soul, and he was trapped around masculinity, which was maybe you may say toxic, which was sort of around the sport, the drinking culture, and that type thing. But he was always able to maintain a calm presence throughout all that. And I guess I lost hope as a young boy, or what a male and a man's supposed to be like. So that really drove me as a young fella to maybe do what I can to be able to help men change the way that we behave in this lifetime. Because, as you know, in Western society, I don't think we're actually doing it that well. We're really connected to our job. What do we do for a living? That's our identity. We suppress our emotions with alcohol and drugs and all different sorts of things, but none of us really dial into who we really are underneath it all. And I believe I had that awareness as a young fella, but I got pulled into the rubbish too. And I had a download when I was 15. I questioned life, and I basically, I was asking myself and with the guidance from others, what it's really about. And I was sitting quietly one day, and my guides come in and said, "You've got to go through this suffering so you can come out the other side and know what it's really like."
that download? Like, I just want to explore that to the sec. Were those voices clear, like when that energy came in, and when you speak about the guides, like?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe, without even knowing it, and I've only just sort of come to realize this over the last, few years, of these voices that come in when they need to. When I'm asking for guidance, it comes in, and that there was a moment where I actually asked, and that came in beyond the mind. It was just, an awareness and observation which I'd never experienced before, but just it was like a heart-centered communication that came through. And if I look back, I've had that experience, throughout the whole journey ever since, and it still happens.
How did that make you feel as a 15-year-old, knowing that your life ahead of you is going to be suffering if you're hearing that? Like, did it help you prepare for it, or was it like, oh shit, now what?
Yeah, good question. Absolutely. I felt confident that I was going to come out and through this. So that I got a number that it was going to be 40 when, after I'd gone through all the experiences, to say, well, you're free now to move on. And it really started to change at 37. That's when things started to move, because I kept getting sucked back into the vortex of the heaviness all the time. Blocking out my spiritual awareness through work, through drinking, that type of thing, to suppress how I really felt without actually really opening myself up. But it took that moment where I decided, now's the time I've got to do something, because I had children as well, and that was a motivator to say, you've got to step into your truth now. And that's something that which I notice a lot of guys are brave enough to do, to really take that leap into the next stage, because that's really tapping us into our truth and our potential in this lifetime. And it's really sad that that a lot of us don't ever get to that point. But I think it's our job to be able to help people get to that stage where they can be trusting enough to move forward and take that leap, for sure.
Didn't you have a friend that committed suicide as well? At what age was you when that happened as well? Because what I get the sense of feeling, you're growing up within a lot of trauma within the family, and we don't, at that age, we just don't realize how much it's affecting us as adults. We don't connect the dots.
Yeah, correct. It's a really interesting guy. I took the journey to work in the mental health space as a young man out of school, and I really wanted to try and help people through that lens. But as you know, when you work in that sort of system, it's very suffocating, and you can't really, work your truth. So back in those days, we used to train people in hospitals. Mental retardation nurses and psych nurses got trained in a clinical setting in a hospital, and they got paid. One night we're at the nurse's home, which was wonderful as a young fella, being able to be in that environment. But we actually, we smoked a little bit of marijuana back then. And it wasn't something that I really wanted to do, but it was just the thing. And my mate Damien, beautiful kid, beautiful soul, just dropped me off one night after that. And he just said, as I'm talking to death, I put my hand on his shoulder and said, "You'll be right, mate." And I walked inside, but I had this strong gut feeling underneath that there was something the matter. And as a young, 22-year-old, I had the knowing, but I didn't act on the knowing, if that makes sense. And I went to bed and I had this feeling that was just arising, and I called the police the next morning, and they told me that he drove his car, shaved his head, pulled a shotgun out, and ta-da. And and that sort of hurt me deeply, but we had to suppress that again. We had to go to the police, talk about, what had happened, go to his funeral, move through that and just move on with life without actually diving deep into the that moment and that trauma, which unfortunately we're very good at in society, is to be able to, push things aside and not deal with it. So, many years later, I'm sitting in meditation, and Damien came in and he said, "You've got to get out and help the men." So get out there and do more to be able to help guys, because, I believe obviously his particular situation could have been avoided if you had have had the tools and the awareness, without feeling, bad enough that he had to go and take that action. And then sadly in Australia, we have, 7 men a day which do that.
7 men a day are committing suicide right now.
In Australia, yes. And, I guess I've played a role in reducing that with the work that we do. But my real passion and purpose in this lifetime is to really help heal, to move people towards that state of self-awareness and healing. So the heavy lifting that goes with the suicide prevention is hard work. A lot of the money in Australia gets focused downstream, but there's no upstream education. I believe, as you do, if we can start to get people connected again, then we're going to potentially, reduce a lot of risk moving forward.
How do you, because I think it's a good time to mention about what your mum shared as well before she passed with you. And because I feel like they all start to connect the dots and paint a picture on why you're doing what you're doing. And had you started the foundation at that point when your mum had, when you learned that from your mum and when she passed?
Yeah, interesting. And I'm very happy to share this because I think it's important. My mum was a beautiful human being, but obviously it had some form of traumas as a young person. She drank alcohol, smoked, was the life of the party, that type of thing. And I was living in Tasmania at the time. She got quite sick, went into hospital. I went to see her, and there was a man sitting at the side of the bed, and she just introduced him as being a friend of my cousin's from Adelaide. And I said, yeah, okay, no worries. And the next day I went back and saw her, and she said, look, that guy that was sitting here yesterday wasn't who you thought it was. He's actually your brother. So she explained to me that when she was a young girl, she was raped by 6 men in the Horsham train station where I'm from, farming community. Obviously, has its challenges, and she had a baby from that episode, which was adopted out. And she went into a shame cycle, obviously, not telling anyone. The only people that knew were her parents and my uncle. And that got suppressed, for 60 years of her life. And yeah, I knew at that time, Guy, that I was already on the journey. I could have went into anger, or I could have went into compassion. I went into compassion because I knew if Mum had have had the tools, she would have not been not put herself in that situation. But also those guys, if they had the awareness, they wouldn't have potentially acted on a situation like that. So I knew then that it was my job to be able to help reduce risk for women, but also to be able to help guys, raise their self-awareness so they're actually more emotionally literate, because we're not taught emotional literacy in modern society. We're taught to be really unconscious of how we're feeling. And, that plays out in many ways, through self-sabotage, through external behaviours and so forth as well. And it's literacy which we don't get taught at school. We get the education to support the economy, but we don't get the education to really be conscious of ourselves. So that really moved me forward. I was already practicing Buddhism at the local Buddhist center, and that gave me the ability to be able to move into that compassionate space a lot more easily. And that really gave me the ability to be able to see Mum, with a different set of eyes, and really be compassionate to her, but also be compassionate to the individuals. And unfortunately, we see situations like that happen still to this day. There's a lot of neglect with the way that we treat women. So, with the charity that I started, part of our duty and obligation is to be able to help reduce risk of domestic and family violence and sexual violence by educating men. And that's hard work, but I think we're having an impact.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all that. Fuck. Um, do you feel that, and I don't want to get into anything kind of, what's the word, conspiracy or anything like that, but I always get the sense is like, is it purposely not educated in a way because we're much more easy to do the job roles, unconscious, unaware of the possibility of something greater connect, and then when people are leaning into anything, this connection is always wrapped in a religion that has some form of structure and, I guess, human doctrine that's gone through it all anyway. And do you feel that the world is changing right now, that this awareness is going to be like, are people purposely doing it, unpurposely doing it? They're just not aware themselves. You've got unconscious people creating an unconscious system to educate in. And like, what are your thoughts on all this after being out there amongst everyone?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I certainly worked in the system at a high level just to get a bird's eye view of how it really works. And when we dive into the truth, we get squashed really quickly. So, I see people that are working in that space, for financial benefit and that type of thing, but really their souls are being taken away. I truly believe we're in a unique moment in time between now and 2032 as a major shifts occurring. More people that are quite asleep are starting to be curious and wake up, and there's been obviously evidence of that over the last 5 years with the fear that's been driven into society, and people are sort of saying, well, hey, maybe we don't need to participate in this if we don't want to. And I think there's a major, major change occurring, right now. So we're in these bodies at this time, for these reasons, to be able to hold space for people, to be able to give people the ability to be able to feel themselves again, to get out of what we call the red zone of the fear and the shame and the guilt and the greed and the apathy, and move to the high vibrations like my dad was in constantly: compassion, kindness, gratitude, love, joy, just being grateful to be alive and the gift that we've actually got, because we've been really suppressed from that gift. And as you know, when we get into a flow state, we're really we're in this beautiful paradigm, which is available to all of us. And I believe it's your and I passion to be able to help people to connect with that. And I think if we can do more of that, people start to become a bit more aware of what's possible for them, and then we start to improve outcomes. The whole mental health system and so forth is really, lukewarm. It's not doing what it needs to do to be able to get people to a high vibration. It's keeping people in a low vibration for a reason. And there's a lot of talk now about it being a broken system, but also that broken system's beautifully designed, and we're actually starting to be more aware of that now, that it's actually been designed that way to keep people dumb, docile and compliant. But people aren't having to play that game anymore. We can start to move through it.
Why 2032?
Yeah, look, if you look at the ancient scripts and so forth, and even Kundalini yoga and the Sikhs talk about it. I believe there's been various scriptures which have been written about a major change between the Aquarian age and this period now. And coming from a farming town, if you had to try to explain this to me 20 or 30 years ago, I would have, not listened. But now it's very logical to me that there's a huge energetic shift happening in this planet. And, the numbers that have been given are sort of 2020, 2030, 2032. And, there's some major changes going on, and people are starting to be, more conscious. So there's still going to be the fear that's going to be constantly tried to driven down to keep us, unconscious. But I think more people are starting to gravitate towards the healing work and the things that they can do within themselves to be able to get them on the journey. And from a male's point of view, as you know, it's very hard to get people to get men to be curious about this. But I think we're in a really important moment in time where we just need to be able to open the spaces and hold the spaces for guys to be able to get back to feeling themselves again.
Yeah, it's definitely changing. It's interesting. I yesterday had a video call with a gentleman that came on to do a video testimonial for us, because long story short, we've been doing retreats and introductory 4-hour workshops, right, as you know. And we, for the first time in Sydney, we did an advanced 4-hour, because we've had enough momentum to invite people that have already been leaning into the work to come back as a group and take it one step further. Because as you know, whenever holding space, the first thing you need to create is a sense of safety, isn't it? And people feel held. And when you bring a room full of strangers together, it can be quite intimidating. So in 4 hours, you can only go so far, obviously, as you introduce the work and so forth. But we did this advanced workshop called Awaken Your Chakras. And it was, long story short, it was incredible. It was beautiful. And we actually had some real tangible experiences. But I was recording a video with a guy yesterday who has been working with us for a while. And he was from a blue collar background. And he's like, I'm sitting here talking about chakras and how they've affected me emotionally and things. And it's like, if this is possible for me, so the guy in his 50s, is possible for anyone. And he said, actually, what surprised me the most was that I've been telling my mates that I've been on this journey, and they've actually been open to listening as opposed to just shutting me down. Because he, mates, very in the physical footy, beer, that environment, right, as we know. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. So maybe things really are starting to shift and people are becoming more and more open to it.
I agree. Some of the most wonderful work that I've done is I've taken AFL clubs to winning a premiership by giving them the ability to be able to open their body through yin yoga, which has helped their nervous system settle down. And these guys are meditating before games. They're going out on the field calm rather than amped up. And obviously the results are taking care of themselves because they do the work of training. that gave me the ability to be able to, feel confident enough that there's the ability to be able to help people as a group to settle in rather than the separation and that type thing. But most importantly, I observed this while working with inmates in a prison, like taking them through yin yoga practices and also meditation practices, and guys that are highly traumatized, in this system and in this Western culture where we're putting more trauma on top of trauma, and I've challenged the justice system on numerous occasions to say we need to be able to help these guys learn to heal if we want to create better societies. Again, the system is about trying to keep people, in fear and in control. And, the incarceration system is a money generator at the end of the day. So we've got to start to really look at things differently. And, I've seen a frequency in the room when guys are grounded and centered and connected, where I've seen us all being one rather than just separate individuals. You know what it's like when we've got a sense of calm and peace in a space, just what that feels like. And when you can see a lot of agitated minds get back to feeling centered again, it's absolutely blissful and beautiful. And that's the frequency that I really love to work with.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? Like, when did you start joining the dots for yourself then with trauma and freeing you up? And because you mentioned about the physical aspects of the body as well, which I'm keen to get into in a moment, because, when you think back, like I look back upon even my generational trauma that's been coming through, like it's proven, I think science proves that genetically it can be passed down 7 generations. So it's not uncommon. Gabor Mate speaks about it. It's not uncommon if you had great grandparents in a prisoner of war camp or feeling lack, that you will actually be, that will be in your DNA, in your genes, and you could be feeling that scarcity, even though you didn't gone through or the horrors of what were presented, right? So when I think about like you sharing about your mum's story and, the upbringing, the suicide, all these things, the body's remembering it, isn't it? And
big time. Yeah. It's interesting because my grandfather on my dad's side was gassed in the First World War.
wow.
And he got out and he came home, and obviously that sort of filtered down, and dad probably suppressed a lot of that too. So for me, Guy, it was coming through the system and then sort of going to that point of wanting to change in my late 30s. And that just was the traditional masculine way of, pushing the physical body. And then, really starting to get back to feeling my masculine potential. So, getting quite strong and fit, and then the ego kicking in and saying, well, you can compete, you can do all these wonderful things. Did all that. Then I got offered a role to do some work with some professional athletes, a Tasmanian cricket team. And we had, Australian players playing, high level athletes. And I was doing some work with them where I was pushing them, but I knew that I was fitter and stronger, in many ways, because I'd done the work. And there was a couple of guys that really were at the level, and we sort of challenged each other. But after a while, I realized that all the work needed to be done above the shoulders with these guys. This is back in 2012. So I was curious about meditation then, because I know when I pushed my body hard, I got into a flow state, and that flow state helped my mind settle. It got me back to a sense of lucidity and fluidity again, which is a beautiful state to be in and a natural way of feeling. But, to have to push myself through all the trauma to get there was a lot of work. So I was probably unwinding a lot of the wounds, which were, personal, but also intergenerational through that practice. Wasn't until I went to the Buddhist center, they made me sit still. That's when the real shit started to happen. Because you can't avoid, you've got to be with yourself, and you've got to be able to sit with whatever it is that's coming. And lots of stuff come over, sitting on a cold floor for hours and hours and hours. And, they gave me the ability to be able to understand the mind, work with the mind, and be curious about, myself and my own journey, but also be compassionate for myself and also be compassionate for the lineage, which had taken a lot of stuff. And, I gravitated out of that, and I started learning the physical practice of yoga. And then I got curious about the physical practice of yin yoga. And yin yoga is about holding the body open for long periods of time to release the fascia. And, the first thing I wanted to do was get up and run out, because primarily, you've got to face yourself. And the physical body for myself was quite tight. as it is with most men, where we're not connected with our bodies, we're connected above the shoulders consistently. So to be able to dive deep into that trauma, into that fear through the physical body, because there's a lot of stuff coming out, a lot of stuff gets stored into the hips. Start opening that up, and then it just opens a world of emotions, and tears start coming and so forth too. So I saw the power in that, and that took me on the journey to becoming a hatha yoga teacher first, and then into the yin. So I got really deep into the yin and trained with some wonderful teachers throughout the world with that. But then the Kundalini yoga came into my life, and that really elevated me to universal consciousness rather than just the third dimensional consciousness, if that makes sense.
Let's go there. How would you describe the universal consciousness and opening up to it? How did that Kundalini teaching open you up to that? Describe it.
Yeah, so through the fitness, I was always training early in the morning between 3 and 6 a.m. And as I know now, yeah, they're the ambrosial hours. So I'd go out running in the dark, just be completely in tune with my senses, but I was connected to the stars, if that makes sense too. And that gave me the ability to feel like I did when I was a kid again. I was just in this joyous state, a beautiful joyous state, running around and just feeling free. And I'd get home, and I'd sit in meditation after that. And basically, I just felt like pure and clean and whole, and then had to go back into the third dimensional world again. But my frequency was so high that it gave me the ability to move through a lot easier. So I did my first hatha yoga teacher training, and we did a pretty intense 2.5 hour practice of asana one morning, like non-stop. And I was lying in shavasana, and just completely unexpectedly, energy just exploded from the base of my spine and shot up the spine out the top of my head.
Were you nervous at that point? Sorry, did it freak you out?
I was completely feeling, I'd let go and surrendered, if that makes sense. I just surrendered, because before we did that practice, I'd been out on a run. So I got up at 3 a.m, went for a run around Sydney, and then came into the practice at whatever it was, 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning, 2.5 hours of asana. So I was very fit. But then the Kundalini woke up, and you would know what this is like, and I'm sure some of the listeners would as well. It's just like you've been released. You've just had this release, and all this energy in your body is working, in this fluidity and frequency, which is really attached to the beauty of the universe, I guess, at the end of the day. And I really didn't have a clue. The instructor, we had a wonderful instructor that was taking us through our first 200-hour training, and he sort of knew what had happened. But from that moment, my life changed pretty well forever, because I knew, what our potential is as humans, and I could see and feel life differently from then. And, when I get into that flow state, a lot of people, like my mate Trevor Handy calls it the effortless effort. When you start doing things and you're not thinking, and you're just in this frequency and flow, it's incredible how you feel. And that's what the Kundalini awakening actually gave me, to work with that flow. And, moving into becoming a Kundalini yoga teacher, I wasn't really connected with wanting more of that. It was more about, okay, what can we do as humans to be able to to awaken ourselves and move energy through the body and chant and do these wonderful things which we're not taught to do.
Do you feel that happened just in divine timing? Were you chasing it, or were you just on this exploration of self? Because I feel so many people are spiritually bypassing and chasing the experiences, or are not wanting to address the traumas and the things that actually need to be dealt with, and then these things take care of themselves when they're ready, right?
Yes. Yep.
That's
exactly what happened. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. I was never chasing stuff. I'd never taken mushrooms, never taken acid or any of the stuff that most people do, or gone to an ayahuasca. Never really been down that path at all. So I was in New York one day, and I was just walking down a street, and I felt this energy just pull me back, and then into a yoga studio, up this flight of stairs. And this woman in white just floated across the room and said, "Oh, hi, I'm such and such." Most women in Kundalini yoga have the surname Kerr, and men have the surname Singh. So this lady's name was such and such Kerr. She said, we have a sadhana in the morning. Would you like to come back? And I know I know what it's like to connect at that moment, of the morning, that time in the morning. So I went back. We went through Kriyas, breath work, chanting, meditation, and a sound frequency with gong. And at that end of that session, I felt like I was vibrating, like nothing I'd ever experienced before. And I just felt incredibly amazing. So my son and I were in New York. He was 15 at the time, 14 or 15. And I just said to him, mate, I've got to go back and do this again tomorrow morning. You're right to stay in bed. And he said, yep. So I went back for a week or two and kept practicing with these guys. And I was at a place called Golden Bridge Yoga, which has been around for quite a while. And they're sort of very, very adept in the Kundalini lineage and the teachings. And so that happened. Came back to Australia. I thought, where can I get more of this? And I was living in Tasmania. There was nothing. I was in Melbourne. Just went to Melbourne for a week. And I was walking down a high street in Paran. Same thing happened, but I was on the opposite side of the road. So the masculine and the feminine side, so the left. Pulled backwards up these stairs. A woman in white walks along and says, I'm such and such. We've got Saturday in the morning. Would you like to come back? I said, well, there's something fucking in this. So basically, I went back. Same thing happened. And within a week, I'd signed up to Kundalini Yoga teacher training. Kundalini Yoga, you don't just get a certificate for doing time. You've got to put the work in. It's a full year's practice of self-discipline, of showing up every morning, doing your sadhana every day and really committing to that working with that frequency. And I can tell you now, the potential we have as humans is untapped once we start to tap into these Kriyas, because it's ancient wisdom, which has been going for years. But
what's a Kriya? Can you explain a Kriya?
A Kriya, yeah. A Kriya primarily is a physical practice. So it's a physical practice where we move energy through the body. So that could be, we have a wonderful one called activating the 10 bodies. In Kundalini Yoga, we talk about the 10 bodies. It's not just the physical body and the auric body and the pranic body. There's a whole dimension with regards to that. So that's an example of, one Kriya that we can work with to be able to activate. And there's a multiple, different Kriyas that we can work with. So the physical practices, the chanting, the meditation practices, which usually, utilize, body parts to be able to get us to a point, and that type of thing.
What's that you do with the fingers? It's because there'll be people on audio too. What's that?
So if we touch our fingers, it basically activates the prefrontal cortex, and it gets us out of the thinking mind back into this again. And all of a sudden the breath starts to flow down. And there's a wonderful practice called Kirtan Kriya, which my teacher, Guru Jeevan, gave me to do for 1,000 days. And I committed to that for 1,000 days. And people just started to see things change in me, and people would walk up and say, look, you have this aura around you. And just out of the blue, people would walk up and say, can you teach me to meditate? So, going back, average guy off a farm from a country town that's accessing this frequency, so if I can do it, anyone can do it. But like doing these practices which get us into a vibration, which we're not aware of, is completely available to all of us. We just got to, commit and do the work at the end of the day.
Yeah, and be okay with what comes up as we commit to doing the work. Like
that's
the
right.
different emotions and the feelings and the shit pits that can start to happen, and just feeling sluggish. It's all sorts, right? Like as this body's releasing,
moving it.
Yeah.
That's one thing that men aren't prepared to do. They're afraid to tap into, what's coming up and what's possible. That's why we've been so well trained and programmed to suppress everything. Been really programmed to suppress. It's time to change that, time to shift it. And that's our job in this lifetime, is to be able to help. Well, my job is to be able to help men awaken, I guess, at the end of the day, but try and normalize it, which is hard work, but I think we're slowly getting there.
We both got podcasts, mate, and I reckon there's quite. I look at the YouTube stats on my podcast, and there's probably about 70% women, but there's men listening and watching these conversations for sure. And it's great, and I think it's just going to continue moving towards this, because it's a strange thing, because like, as you know, I feel more man than ever. Like, even like, it's just like I feel balanced. That feminine and that masculine energy has really kind of found this natural equilibrium within me, and knowing when to lean on which one as it flows. Like, I was down the CrossFit gym last night. I still love to lift weights, grunt, groan, throw my stuff around, and beat my chest. Like, it doesn't take anything away from me, but it all it's done is open up so much more potential within myself. That's what I feel is happening.
Same with me. Yeah, I was the same guy. You know, you look at the fitness being all the yang and the masculine, and then having to dive into the feminine. You know, going to yoga teacher trainings where you're one man in a group of 20. You know, and to be okay with that, because I knew there was something that was trying to teach me behind it all. You know, I thought, I just got to work with this. What's it trying to teach me? Let go and just see what happens. And I really believe, you know, if we can start to build that literacy with most males out there, then we'll get somewhere, you know, because we really want people to be able to reach their potential, and they don't need the suppressants and, you know, the addictive behaviors which we succumb to. And I might have mentioned to you a practice that I did, which was called white tantric yoga, which is, you know, part of the Kundalini yoga lineage, where we have to sit on a mat and look into a woman's eyes for up to 12 hours. And that's
so that's a male has to be looking into a male looking into a female eyes, right? Vice versa.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
12 hours.
So we're doing the eye gazing. We're also lifting our arms up and holding it for half an hour without putting them down. Still maintaining eye contact, that sort of thing.
Do you get up for the toilet or anything, or in that time, or?
They give you a few breaks throughout the day, but little by little, I saw my ego deteriorating and disintegrating, and getting back to connection with my soul. And at the end of that practice, you know, I know some colleagues who were in that room with me, and they went back and watched the footy. I went outside and I just wandered the streets for hours and felt really connected to my soul self. And for months and months and months after that, I saw life through the eyes of my soul. And I saw every human being the same way as being a soul in a human body, and looking at life from that lens.
How would you describe that to people that have not experienced that before? Like, looking through the eyes of from your soul level.
Think about a time when you're completely feeling centered and grounded, or you're in a place where you feel free. You know, that's really what it is. It's that moment where you can feel complete surrender and complete freedom, because, you know, through that practice, minute by minute, hour by hour, you've got to learn to let go and surrender. And when you do that, you open yourself up to really what's possible and our potential and the eternal being, which is behind the persona of the ego and the self.
What were that's amazing. That's amazing. I've not heard of that before. I've done eye gazing and things like that, but not for 12 hours. Oh my God. And do they talk about what are the mechanisms behind it? Like, why is eye gazing so powerful and dissolves the ego, like you said?
I didn't have a clue, to be honest. I was just doing that so I could pass my Kundalini yoga teacher training. So didn't have a clue. Didn't have a clue what were to expect, what it was all about while we were doing it. I still to this day haven't had like a lot of strong explanation around it, but I've just discovered since then about why and what it's all about, because it gives us the ability to be able to see ourselves in someone else, you know, and understand that we are all one and we are all connected. And when you're able to do that and you see beyond the personality, beyond the ego, into this beautiful, you know, soul, but also see that within yourself, that allows you to understand that there's so much more behind the judgments and opinions of the mind, and how we're sort of so connected to the mind, but there's so much more to us as eternal beings, which is a hard pill to swallow for most people to understand that that's who we really are. To be able to observe yourself as being that in its essence, and understand that we're in these bodies for a reason, to learn. Then we move through, and then we potentially come back again and have another experience, or go off somewhere else and do something else, you know, in another dimension. But if you can develop that, you know, understanding and frequency, I think it makes our time more enjoyable on Earth, and it gives us the ability to be able to really live, within that purpose and truth of who we really are. If you look at, I love ancient wisdom and American Indian ancient wisdom and Australian, Aboriginal wisdom. They have this knowing, they can sense something that's happened thousands of kilometers away without being told. This is the stuff which has been shut down for us as humans. But once you get all this energy activated again, and that's really getting back to that sense of, intuition and instinct and that soul self. If you can start to be more connected to that, then all of a sudden it's a whole different world out there.
Ain't that the truth? Should,
Yeah.
like I feared, like I'd love to hear your experiences from this, because I feared that energy for a long time. It actually came easily to me. Like it was just something, I don't know. I don't know why, right? When I started leaning into this, it was like, holy shit, this is coming on. And yet obviously as through that energy, there's a movement of trauma and a release of the ego self and all that stuff that we talk about that has to almost be purified, or that energy flow again and be released, right? So we get really back to the authentic self, and the body can really find its way back to its natural healthy state. But it used to terrify me, mate. Like when I first leaned in, it was like what the fuck is happening? My third eye would open and I would be having these mystical experiences at 3 o'clock in the morning that I was like, people are going to think I'm bonkers.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. That is our protection mechanism, which is always going to, be there to try and look after us at the end of the day. But if you can see that and just, talk to yourself so you're feeling you're safe here. Know that you're safe and you're able to have this experience because, nothing's going to happen to you. You're going to come through and open yourself up to what's there rather than blocking it out or masking it or whatever. God, and that's not our fault. You talk about 7 generations, that's rolled downhill into us, So it's our job now to be able to really step into that and move away from that fear. It's easy to go into fear. They've done such a great job to get us to feel like that. If you look at 7 generations past, particularly in Australia, it's been driven by fear from day one.
Yeah.
So, we've got to really start to realize there's so much more to this than what we perceive, and being able to step into that. And that's the trick for men, is to be able to, okay, this is going to be uncomfortable, but it's exactly what I need to do. I've got to put myself into discomfort so I can move through to be able to be comfortable with who I really am, rather than going through life and then having regrets. And some of the most powerful work that I've done as an individual too is to work with old men at end of life and listen to their journeys and what they missed and what they really loved doing. And it wasn't about the assets and the money and what they had. It was all about the wonderful things that they'd done and the experiences they've had with other people, which were non-monetary. They were just, giving us the ability to be able to interact from our pure self again. And that just gave me the ability to be able to, okay, this is really where I need to start to live my life from. Look at life as being a gift and a joy, and understanding that at the end we're going to potentially look back with some regrets. But day by day, if we can make these little subtle changes within ourselves, and that'll mean us stepping into our fears and stepping into the discomfort. We'd never have it mastered. I think it's a complete journey from start to finish. Once we start, we start to feel we've got it mastered. We get a whack across the back of the head really quick. It's about being curious and open and surrendering to what is, as much as we possibly can, but also continually doing the work, showing up, doing the workshops, doing the retreats, doing your own personal practices to be able to clear the energy and to be able to move that energy on. And, we are those beings that do take on energy. So we're going to be able to clear it. And you and I have had this conversation where we've done workshops and stuff for people and we carry stuff after that. If we're not careful, that can lead us into suppression. We're going to be able to sweep that and move it on. And it's not common literacy to know that, but I think that's the literacy we need to start to develop into people's game moving forward.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I always think of the book The Secrets of Aboriginal Healing by Gary and
Mm.
Robbie Holtz.
Robbie, yeah, yeah,
I've had Robbie on the podcast a couple of times, like, and that first ingredient of when working with the Aboriginals, they would always say you have to have willingness. You gotta have the willingness to go there and like
mm,
be 100%. I'm in, not 85 or 70 or 30. Like, it's like making that decision and go, you know what, I'm going to go down this path. Like, I made a conscious decision to know that I'm going to break the lineage of trauma in my for the generations to come, and even my children. Like, it's no accident I had children later in life, because I'd done so much work on myself before I got there. I think now, looking
mm,
back, you know what I
mm.
mean? And I see that in clearing that and really setting up a legacy for the generations that are going to come through now, you know?
Great. Yeah, that was my primary driver too. But if I can help a man spark ego by saying to them that they can be the cycle breaker, that usually gets them on a path of curiosity.
Mm,
Because we can all break cycles. There's always improvements that we can make. If my dad had have been able to stand up at that moment as a 14-year-old boy, that would have, completely changed the trajectory of my life. But I knew I had to go down that pathway of suffering to understand really what it's all about. But really, suffering is not what life is all about. It's meant to be about a beautiful frequency. And I believe the gifts that we're given, are absolutely wonderful. We've just been sort of trained away from that. So sometimes, yes, the suffering is absolutely necessary. But, once we realize that it's not who we are, we can be curious enough to move through those suffering states into a more fluid state. But it's also being prepared to say, I'm going to break the cycle. I'm going to be the one that changes so my kids can be better. How many parents now are homeschooling their kids because they don't want their kids to go through all the suffering that system puts on us, or has put on us? And um, I've seen kids that,
a lot of
that
them.
are in a high vibration early all the way through because they haven't had that trauma put on them, and the judgments and the comparisons, the expectations, and all those types of things, which really trap us.
Mm.
So if you can remove that, you've got a wonderful head start to be able to really see the life as a gift and reach your potential. I believe for
Yeah,
sure.
amen. And it's the company you keep. You got to put yourself around people that lift you up, not suppress you, right? Like,
Yes.
it's the only, I feel it's like literally the key component. It's the only way. You have to surround yourself with people that inspire you to do better, not
Yeah.
justify their actions of why they're not doing better and stay in that state, but actually work with you. And if you're willing to do that and go there, and things shift. I know that's what happened with me. It's like,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it's just a matter of, getting to that first stage and that first step. But you've got to have something to motivate you to
Mm.
get you there. You've got to have something that really, really motivates you. It might be a health problem. It might be, something to do with your kids or whatever, to say, I'm standing up here. I'm going to create the change. And, it's a big, big thing for a man to be able to get to that point. But, we're so used to going downstream and waiting until a problem occurs before we actually do something. Well, let's start to work upstream and arrest a problem before it possibly happens. And, that's been a trick for me, Guy. I've had to work in heavy energy for quite a while, and, it's certainly challenging. And I have been able to be around the frequency of individuals that I need to be around. So I've got to step back into that space to have myself be more nourished moving forward. And I think there's been a lot of illusion around that, in this country, because most of the places of connection have been in the past through the pub or the church, and that doesn't really, possibly give us what we need, in many ways. But getting connected with people they're on a similar journey, that are really, really keen to be able to make those changes and break those cycles, and have a wonderful life, I think is very achievable for us. But we're just going to make sure that we stay committed to that, because we can get pulled back into the old self really quickly, and into that suppressive state and that depressive state. But we don't have to be operating there. I really believe that, we
Mm.
can put a full stop on it and move forward and continually move forward if we, make sure that we are connected personally, but also connected with the right people around us as well.
Absolutely. So what's next for you, mate? What you got coming up? Where are you taking all this for yourself?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting one, Guy. Like, I started this charity up to try and help men. We have men's circles operating throughout Australia, so we train local men up to run these circles where guys get together and they can move stuff on through communication. I've seen men walk into these things and they're completely choked up, and for the first time they've felt safe and they've been able to talk about their experiences. Guys that have had heavy traumas, guys that have had stuff happen to them which they've never spoken about before, that they've actually spoken to about in a room of men that they've never met. So I see that working really well. But my passion is to be able to move out of that potentially and move more into healing spaces, so to create more meditation circles, so people, both men and women, can get together in regional centers and we learn and we meditate together. Because I know when we do that and we hold space in a room, it's so much more powerful than doing it on your own. So to normalize meditation in Australia, I think is really necessary, and this is the right moment in time to do it. This 25 to 30, 32 gap to be able to get people connected with themselves, I think is really key. So, the Outback Mind really wants to be able to create more meditation circles moving forward. We've got a men's meditation retreat happening on Kangaroo Island in October. We really encourage any man listening to this to say, I'm going to go and do something wonderful for myself. Mark Philly and I are running it, and Mark's a wonderful teacher. That's very affordable. It's in a pristine spot. So, those sorts of things, being able to do more retreats. The domestic violence stuff will potentially, fade away, but we've made some wonderful documentaries, which we go out and we screen to be able to provide education and awareness around domestic violence, but also men's health. And I believe that's the missing link. We'll have awareness days in Australia. We'll talk about stuff, but we're not providing education. So, being a charity, we've found it hard to survive financially, but the money I have been able to raise, I've put back in by making films, and those films are visuals where people can see themselves in them, and people walk away with an experience. So the next one would be to make a meditation documentary around why meditation is important. So that's something I want to work on in the future. And we really need some financial support. So if anyone out there feels, compelled about trying to help, we really welcome donations and financial support, because we don't get it. And I don't like to get it through grants or funds, government funds. I like to try and get it through philanthropy or donations to be able to support us to do what we do. And as I said, it's heavy lifting, but I think the lightness is starting to open up, and I think the more healing work that we can do moving forward is really what's needed in society. And I think this gap of the next 5 to 7 years, it's our journey to be able to do that for sure.
Wow, mate, good on you. You got so much going on. It's a lot, but it's amazing, mate, what you're doing, and it's fantastic. And I have no doubt, this podcast will bring a lot of awareness to all the good things you're doing. Once it gets out there. So yeah, especially if people are watching this on YouTube or anything, please let us know in the comments below as well. Do you know somebody that is struggling emotionally, physically, a male or even a female? But I think it will highlight that we're all wanting connection, that we're all wanting to connect back to our hearts and souls. I really do. And I believe now is the time in history for it to be happening, if not now, then when.
Yeah, agree. It's possible. I've seen, as I said, the most traumatized people get back to that sense of healing again. It's absolutely available to us all, but it needs guys like you and I to be able to create spaces and provide opportunities for people to do that and feel safe to do that. That's really key moving forward. So that's our role for sure.
Exactly. Can you say your website out, the URL? The links will be in the show notes for everyone.
Yeah, so it's www.outbackmind.org.au. So we're a charity. If people make a donation, it's fully tax deductible for them. We really encourage, some organisations that want to try and help men's health to partner with us. and sponsor us, potentially. And please follow us on, Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook, the Outback Mind Foundation. I just think, the more awareness we can raise with regards to men's wellbeing, the better. And the more support that we can get, the more people will benefit out there for sure. The more people we can reach, I think, is really key and important moving forward. So,
with everything we've covered today, is there anything you want to leave people who listen to ponder upon?
Certainly, understand that we're in these bodies at this moment in time for a reason. And, we can be the change in the world that we wish to see if we're prepared to step up into that space. The gift of life is untapped and unexplored. And, if we can start to be curious about what that actually is and what's possible for us, there's no heaven really external. It's all here for us if we choose to see it. I really believe that. You start to open yourself up to what's available to you and what's happening, within this natural wonderland that we're in. The gift is actually here, ready, waiting for us, here and now. And this experience is, can be a wonderful experience if we start to, see through that lens. So, don't be afraid to break a cycle. Don't be afraid to break a pattern. Don't be afraid to change your habit. Don't be afraid to step into your truth and your purpose, because the world needs us and the world needs people like you to be able to make a change. And if you can do that, that will ripple on to many people around you. So I hope this conversation has helped in some way, to realize that, the gift of life is only short-lived in this particular lifetime. So let's make the most of it together as one.
Thanks, man. I have no doubt that this conversation will help many. Thank you, Aaron. Thanks for everything you do, my man. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Appreciate it, bro. Thanks so much.
You're welcome, mate. Much blessings.